Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carol Tallon. I'm the founder of PropTech Ireland, and today we're going to go through the steps of digital transformation for estate agents. Typically, we deal with independent estate agents rather than franchises or large branches. However, the same rules apply. So, to get started, I suppose, first of all, to say that obviously this program was designed for the Irish market, but actually a lot of the principles you will find are applicable because actually we've taken a lot of the learnings by looking at best practice from international jurisdictions. So to start off with, I suppose the first thing we do is look at the difference between agile and digital. And I think a big part of this for us was that we knew that the market was evolving, we knew that innovation was on the way, and that digital was an important key to unlock some of that potential. However, it's not the only key, and it's not the only solution. So, in fact, this is where the agility comes in. We know that the pace of change throughout the property market and the property industry in general, it's increasing at a rate that we've never seen before. And from that point of view, it's much more important that we train the next generation of estate agents and property service providers to be agile, to be able to respond to to the changes around them and to the changing landscape. Because in the past, where agents have upskilled in one particular area or brought in one technology, what happens is that they were able to sit on that technology for 5, 6, 7 years, and that was good enough. Unfortunately, that's not going to be good enough anymore. So what's most important is that we don't see any one particular digital solution as being the overall solution, that we use it as a tool. And the important learning is that we stay current with the changing consumer expectations around us. So maybe we should just back up a bit and see, why do we need digital transformation for a start? And for me, about 3 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, when I was looking into this emerging prop tech sector, and generally I was looking at news from the UK and the US, many Eastern European countries, and the technology that was coming out, it was certainly marvelous. It was interesting. We were fascinated by it in industry discussions in Ireland, but there was very little application of it. You know, we could see the potential, we could see the potential uses, but we weren't seeing the use. And for us, one of the trends that we saw in Ireland, it hasn't been mirrored in the UK to the same extent, but it is a trend that has been seen. It's that since the global economic crash, and as markets around the world started to recover, we saw a new type of agents, and a new type of agency. In Ireland, that looked like independent estate agencies. And it was interesting to us to see how the independent estate agents were growing, not just in urban areas, but in rural areas, and that they were branching out and they were winning new business in quite a turbulent time. And not only were they winning new business, but at that time, we were still in a contracting market. And in a contracting market, when you come in as a new entrant, you're generally taking business from somebody else's table. And how were they able to do that? And this was something that we wondered about and looked into and really analysed to see. And there was one, while there was many different factors, there was one underlying theme, and that was the founder's mindset. People starting up, they continue to they had this founder's mindset that all new businesses have, and in fact they need to have, because if you don't have a founder's mindset where you respond to the marketplace around you, then quite simply you won't last in business, because within the first year you will likely have run out of money if consumers in the marketplace aren't using your service. But I think what happened here is that in Ireland particularly, and I know it's the same for many property markets around the world, you've established players in the market in terms of property service providers. You have the leaders, you have the giants, and these guys generally, while there was losses made during the crash, they had enough fat built up around them that they could survive, they could continue. However, they saw a slow decade of decline because they just weren't able to respond fast enough to the changing environment. So what we try to do with the Agile Agent program through Property District is that we're capturing this founder's mindset as it applies to independent estate agents, and they're people who are established only in the last 7 to 10 years, and they're not established with the support of any franchise or big name brand. And we looked at how we could leverage that to take and instill the learnings then across the industry. So one of the things we saw was that as more and more new technologies actually began to emerge and the news of new technologies emerge, people within the industry really saw the potential. They could see the change was coming, and yet the over-analysis of this and the sheer data overload of their own businesses and not knowing what to do with it, it led to a very scattergun approach. And I would say scattergun is probably the way to describe a lot of the early PropTech implementation in offices. Essentially, you had somebody seeing or hearing or being pitched to about new technologies, and they could see an application for it in their agency for either their buyers or sellers or tenants, and they brought it in, and then perhaps were surprised that it didn't do what it was meant to do. It didn't have the magic wand effect that they had been expecting. And why is that? A lot of times we saw that essentially the decision to buy in some of these technologies were effectively false conclusions caused by really not understanding not just the new technologies, but where they would fit, not for the industry, but actually for the particular estate agency in question. And the opposite side of rashly implementing perhaps the wrong technologies, the opposite side of that is sheerly inaction. And that's also a problem because inaction simply isn't an option anymore, because the industry has moved on to the point that consumers want something different. And that's why we saw a lot of early stage PropTech development was consumer led. Now, that's something that we've definitely seen a shift away from since late 2016, early 2017. There's definitely a shift away from just the consumers innovating new ways to either not use agents or to improve the relationship and how they use the service through agents. What we're seeing now is a lot of industry-led innovation. That has taken some time to happen, but it's a great development. So one of the things I want to do is to start by understanding where, when you run an estate agency, where do you start? We found that it's simplest to break it down and focus initially on 3 core areas. They are your operations, and that's how you run your business. The offering is what you offer to various consumers, and you'll see repeatedly that I refer to the people who are using our service not as buyers, not as sellers, not as tenants, because in a way that's actually part of the problem of the past, that it was unclear who we were delivering services to. So when we talk about the offering, it is to take in every touch point that a property consumer has with our agency. And the third area is business development. And I think that possibly business development is the area that has gotten the most attention in recent years, because this is where we saw a lot of the flashy, VR technologies, virtual walkthroughs, where people could view properties remotely. They could view properties that hadn't yet been built. And it really allowed potential buyers and investors to experience the proposed new development, particularly for off-plan. But that's almost like starting midway. I won't say at the end, but certainly starting midway. So we're going to just start by looking at the operational side of things. So in terms of the operation, generally speaking, there are different ways to innovate. So as in, we can innovate our product or service, we can innovate how we deliver that product or service, or we can innovate the business model that essentially provides for how we run our business. And so when we look at the business model innovation here, we're actually looking at it on the operational side of the business. So that is the systems internally. They might be our systems for onboarding new clients, for dealing with new clients on an ongoing basis, right through to the processes for accounting and regular reports and providing for maintenance of properties. A big part of this I found is that technology has already touched a lot of this. So most of the firms we've dealt with have had for maybe 3 years or 7 years, or some firms have even had for 12 and 13 years, a strong industry-focused CRM system. However, what we came to realize very quickly is that these CRM systems are not being used to their full potential at all. And this is probably something that we're all guilty of, whether it's our cars or our phones or any of the new technology appliances that we have in our homes or offices. We're not using them to the capacity that they can be used. So the first step of digital transformation, once you have decided what it means for your estate agency and what it will look like for your estate agency, the next step is actually to look at your in-house resources and see what can be done with that. So an important part of looking at your internal resources, of course, is not just about your technology. It's absolutely about the team that you have, and the team can be broken into those that are income generating and those who are supporting the income generators. And there will most likely be an element of upskilling needed. But before you get to the upskilling, you absolutely want the buy-in in terms of the change that your organization is going to have to go through. Because with the all digital transformation, generally the technology works. The issue is generally going to come down to how will you manage your team to come along with you? How will you manage to harness their learnings to be able to make the decisions about what to go with? So actually, HR becomes a huge part and a huge consideration for digital transformation. So the next step, as I've touched on there briefly, is consumer versus customer. And this is something that actually I found that estate agents generally had a little bit of a difficulty with this. So in the past, we had buyer's agents, we had seller's agents, and there was generally a bit of confusion as to when estate agents would talk about their client, they were often referring to the buyer, despite the fact that the buyer was not in fact paying their invoice, that the seller was. So there just seemed to be almost the wrong terminology used, and that confused things in the office, whereby you had investors maybe not being treated very well, sellers not being prioritized, buyers being prioritized to the point where they were given false expectations about how to use your service. So in fact, moving forward, we're definitely moving to a model where we discuss the consumer, and an important part of that is that we want to separate, say, the experience of people who are actually paying for our services. And that's a really important point. So as in the person who's paying for our services, how are they experiencing our firm at every touch point? And then we actually map the consumer touch points. So that might be your letting and managing an investment property. But we don't just think about the investor. We don't just think about the investor's team and their tax advisors and their accountants and the people that we need to issue reports to. We're also thinking about the potential tenants or anybody who comes in contact as a potential consumer of the property that comes in contact with our agency and with our website, with our social media, that carries through. Now, the third area we look at is in terms of business development, and there's so much potential here. I think one of the things that came up about business development is that, really savvy digital transformation, it's not about resources, it's always about resourcefulness and knowing where to focus. Now, this is increasingly important in an uncertain market, and as most markets have been in recovery mode for maybe the last 5 to 3 years, depending on which country you're in or in which city, in fact, you're in. So it's always a case that we look at the resourcefulness rather than just the resources. And actually, starting with that, when you know your business, the brand suddenly, it stops being something that's just a nice to have, and it actually begins to be something that drives value for your firm. And that's going to become increasingly important. It has already increased in importance in the last decade, but it will become increasingly important. So in terms of our brand, really what we're looking at there is we need to get a unified message and theme going out across our website, our social media, our listings on online platforms, and everything that diverts. But one of the communications messages that really got lost in the past has been, with the rise of all of these different social media platforms, I've had estate agents say to me that their website isn't so important, and I see them sharing links to properties they're selling that are hosted on maybe online sales platforms, and they're using their social media, I suppose, their social media activities to drive all traffic to the platforms, where what we would suggest is that you're always driving things to your home, your own real estate on the internet, which is of course your website. So when you have your website, you're looking at putting, not just in terms of your website, it's not just about hosting property. This is where you need to also be setting the tone and message of your business. It's everything on social media should be pointing back to your website, not to platforms. And it's about getting a unified message in offline and online. There's no point in having a fabulous social media management if you don't have good in-service. So when somebody comes into your office, if you don't have excellent customer service when they come in, then it doesn't matter how impressive you are on social media. These things just don't tally. Equally, if you don't have a strong customer ethos on social media, then you're less likely to get people arriving into your office. And this is where the unified theme comes in. And technology absolutely is an enabler of that, but only if it's used correctly. In fact, if it's not used correctly, it can actually be more damaging. And again, we're looking at media, but the term media is very broad, because yes, there's the rise in social media, but in fact, that's going to evolve over time. And of course, I have my own theories about how social media and property promotion will evolve through that. But I think looking at what we have at the moment, traditional media is still used to advertise properties in many areas, although not always, not for every property. So as in, we still are using local newspapers to talk about upcoming auctions, or maybe to highlight a particular key property. And that can be supported then with our new media, which is our social media. So it's important to draw the distinction there between marketing and PR. So I suppose the next question is, we're talking about change, but how important is change? Do we want to make it, or are we only making this change because we feel it's necessary? And I would imagine, and from my experience, we're seeing that there's a little bit of both. It's not a case that everybody is ready to change. In some cases, this change is really being thrust upon them. And unfortunately, that's very normal, but we still need to get on with it. So what I would say, the reason that we're changing is because the rules really have changed. And the reason they've changed is because of changing consumer demands. So this is an excellent insight that I got from a completely off-topic book that I was reading, but it really struck me that this can be applied through our property learnings. The reality is that it doesn't matter that consumers are being educated outside of the property industry. The reality is their expectations are changing, and they're not going to accept less when dealing with a property transaction. Now, unfortunately, they have definitely accepted less in the past. And a big reason for that is because property tends to be an infrequent purchase. So therefore, people put up with I suppose they put up with very unsatisfactory service. So we need to move on from that, because buyers have moved on from that. It's interesting, actually, I was reading a PropTech article just about in the last month or two, detailing the top 15 PropTech innovations in the UK for 2018. And out of the top 15, at least 6 or 7 of those had at their core an element that replaced agency. So whether it was a state agency or letting agency. Now that's a trend we haven't seen quite so sharply in Ireland, but I think it does show that consumer expectations, not just are they changing, but actually their tolerance even on infrequent purchases like property or even moving rental apartments, they're not going to accept anything less. So, I mean, what are those changing expectations? Absolutely, it's wanting things on demand. It's 24/7 access. It's real time. They want accurate information to the second. And I think it's really important to see when you put it in the context of who's educating these consumers. So, for example, Amazon has spent a decade and a half educating the market to say that they can have whatever they want when they want it. It is on demand. You know, Google has given us accurate information in real time. So therefore, we don't expect to have to wait to have things checked. And the rise in Airbnb, and I'm always fascinated that Airbnb has essentially become the largest hospitality provider without owning any beds. And, you know, that's really harnessed this unique experience that people want. You know, similarly with Netflix. Actually, when I see Netflix there, I am reminded that recently I read a mission statement that said the company in question wanted to be they wanted to make home entertainment more convenient for consumers. And when I read that mission statement, straight away I thought of Netflix. Turns out it was the mission statement of Blockbuster. But unfortunately, Blockbuster didn't stay true to its mission statement because when customer expectations changed, they invested in protecting their why rather than how, in how they deliver things rather than why they're doing it. And what that meant is that they didn't keep pace with change, so therefore they weren't able to keep consumers happy. And now we see that consumers have actually gone to a more personal service like Netflix. So, sorry, that's again back to who is educating the market. So our buyers and sellers and tenants expect something new from the market, whether it's leaders in the technology field or actually like Google and Netflix and Airbnb, and this is why they're changing, so you need to get on board with it. We've discussed there the importance of the founder's mindset, and I think actually even established estate agents could really sit back and look that if they were establishing their business today, what would it look like, and actually use that to maybe the roadmap for redesigning their service and then bringing in the new technologies around it. So finally, in terms of the PropTech solutions, I think the important thing to point out is that PropTech is going to be an enabler of estate agencies and it not essentially or simply replacing them. So from that point of view, we need to get our existing resources like our CRMs and our shared diary facilities and our integrated accounts, we need to get them right so that we can actually harness the new technologies that are coming on board. And the other thing, when we're choosing new technologies, remember, it's not just about you. And that's why we don't just look at how it will impact the organization. It has to be what is going to make this a great experience for our consumers. So whether that's the rise in online bidding platforms, which we're seeing very heavily in Ireland at the moment. In fact, our largest estate agency has now launched an online bidding platform about 18 months after independent estate agents started introducing it. But the current situation now is that online bidding platforms allowing buyers and sellers to access 24-hour bidding, 24/7 bidding rooms, that's no longer a nice to have or even optional going forward. This is now the standard of how we facilitate bidding through technology. So essentially all estate agents need to get on board with that, much like digital signatures, vendor logins to CRM systems and all electronic information at this stage. Again, conveyancing is still a little bit slow. In terms of marketing solutions, what we're seeing is the interactive touch screens, similar to estate partners. The new platforms that are coming into rival, which are unlikely to be just websites, they're much more likely to be AI enabled notifications coming through our smart devices, not necessarily through Facebook, although that's where we've seen them at the moment. And obviously the 3D tours and virtual reality walkthroughs are helping not just off-plan properties, but also for remote buyers and investors. Chatbots is probably the solution that we're seeing for AI in terms of estate agents being off duty, but still contactable. So at this stage, we might just see it for any questions coming in. Now I see one question there. Okay, now here's a question saying, what will successful transformation look like for any firm or individual estate agency? Okay, well, I think I have a very simple way to sum up this. And look, it's important that successful transformation, it really needs to lay the framework for an agile, responsive agency of the future. So the key takeaway from today, I hope, will be that for each individual estate agency, that you determine what the transformation your firm needs based on the resources that you currently have and the environment and the marketplace that you're actually working in. In order, the importance of doing this is so that you recognize that what progress will be, so you can set your appropriate KPIs. So like, and in terms of KPIs, your key performance indicators there, what we're looking at is, are your targets going to be increased revenue? Is it going to be new markets acquired, or maybe a greater share of existing markets? Will it be to lower your costs or to lower your client acquisition costs, which is going to be a huge factor over the next few years? But there's also increased competition or increased competitive advantage. Will that be where technology is going to be an enabler for your particular firm? So I suppose the biggest thing I would say there is that it's not one big initiative. It has to be a sustainable and sustained shift in culture and ongoing practices. It's not just about a specific suite of technology or tools. The cultural side of being ready to adapt to the changing marketplace is absolutely the most important thing. And you know, in the past, what we've seen with estate agents is that they've had a tendency to make assumptions about their market and about their consumers and what their consumers want. And to that, I would say business as usual is just no longer an option, because the traditional property offering is fundamentally incompatible with property consumers' expectations today. I mean, that's really the big takeaway from today. And we could probably follow that up by saying assumption is the natural enemy of insight. Sorry, I see one final question here. Could you explain one of your successful transformations for an estate agency, and what kind of technologies or tools did you put in place? Okay, now actually that's a really easy one, because we're actually going through a program of digital transformation with 12 agents across Ireland today. And it's very important to point out that these are independent estate agents. All of them have income of less than 1.5 million, and all have fewer than 5 income generators. So that's the category of estate agent that we're dealing with at the moment. Now, leaving all of those common factors aside, what we found when we went into these agents was that there was a huge difference in terms of technology. So, for example, we went into firms that were still using a manual diary, and everything was going in duplicate, even though they had a CRM system. We had situations where estate agents going out, they would come into the office in the morning, and then before going out for the day would take photographs of a paper diary with appointments, and then they would need to be contacted throughout the day if there was any changes. And in one of the firms that we found, that they actually had quite an expensive CRM system in place. It just wasn't being used, and they'd had the system in place for 3 years. So the simple solution around that was actually to bring back the provider of the CRM system, to have them trained, to have all the staff trained on how to actually get the most out of these services. So that was a really simple one. And then from there, we're moving on to immediately employing online bidding platform, because as I mentioned, in Ireland, our marketplace over the last 18 months have moved on to the point where buyers and sellers expect to be able to make their bids online, and to be able to see other people's bids online. So they want that transparency. They want it's not in terms of the transparency, it's an important one, but it's also the control. So say, for example, they're told the bidding is going to continue until Friday at 12 o'clock. So they understand how many people are bidding, at what rate are they bidding? Are they going up by increments of €1,000 or €5,000? Are they bidding every 2 hours or every 20 minutes? Because all of these things are important. So that's one of the transformations that's going on at the moment, and that particular one is very interesting because we came from a place of being quite far behind to actually getting at least on par with best practice, and we're aiming to go above that. So that's one of the transformations. Another one that we were dealing with is, sorry, I'm reading questions here while we go. So actually, I won't give any more examples of just the CRM system in terms of digital transformation. So one thing I will talk about are letting agents, because we went into a place where there was a full-time member of staff dealing with lettings, and they were dealing with a small number, fewer than 20 lettings. Now that will actually seem quite bizarre to experienced estate agents and letting agents here, but the technology wasn't put in place to actually enable this staff member. So the staff member was manually doing up reports every month for estate agents on these properties, where again, actually a simple extension of the CRM system that they were currently using would have actually enabled would have enabled the reporting, but more importantly, a tie-in between the accounts. Now, this is just an important point for any estate agents here. There seems to be a practice of bringing in good CRM systems, bringing in good accounting systems, and not keeping either up to date, not using either up to date, but not connecting them. And connecting them is actually the greatest, it's the single biggest time saver in terms of reporting for landlords. So that's something that if you haven't got done, it's a really simple technique to get started on straight away. Somebody else asked me, did we put in place smart contracts with blockchain technology? Thank you for that, Paul. Unfortunately, in Ireland, blockchain technology has only been used twice for property transactions, and unfortunately, we had a move by the Law Society of Ireland just in the last month to say that after nearly 20 years of having an e-conveyancing committee, they've decided to do what they called a game changer for conveyancing. Now, essentially what they're doing is they're moving the investigation of title to the start rather than to the end of the conveyancing process, which means similar to when new homes are being sold or similar to auctions, the title pack will be prepared and handed over to the buyer's solicitor pre-contract. So that will cut out, we hope, weeks of delays for conveyancing at the moment. Unfortunately, this move by the Law Society does seem to indicate that this is as far as they're willing to innovate, which means blockchain technology does not look like it's going to be at the forefront of innovation in Ireland, unfortunately, at this time. And all mortgage properties must be dealt with through the Law Society of Ireland. So unfortunately, here's the piece of resistance that we're seeing in terms of technology, because interestingly, our land registry or our property registration authority and our ordnance survey, our geo services, they've both kept pace with technology. So actually, we could use smart technologies straight away. We could have transactions registered on blockchain, but unfortunately, we need the Law Society of Ireland to get on board with that. And the latest move by them, only in the last month, seems to indicate that that's not how we're going to move forward. I have another message here from Bobby to say that's how we do it in the US. Bobby, I presume you're saying as in registration on smart contracts with blockchain technology. And if so, I completely agree that that's the way it should be done. Unfortunately, in Ireland, it looks like there's huge resistance, industry resistance across conveyancers to doing that. I would be a huge proponent of using blockchain technology because we know that actually it would be suitable for at least 90% of the title of lands here in Ireland. And we're such a small country that actually it would be a very workable solution. Unfortunately, we don't have it. Oh, thank you, Bobby, you just confirmed that. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. The way you're doing it in the US is definitely the way that it ought to be done. but unfortunately we're a little bit behind that here, and I'm not sure that the UK is faring much better. Okay, I think we've come to the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining in and for those questions. And if anybody has any further questions, certainly you can contact me by email through PropTech Ireland or through Property District Ireland, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carol, on behalf of Global PropTech Online. It was a very good presentation. We all enjoyed it. I wish you all a happy and a nice rest of your day, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much, and I hope the technology stood up okay.
Yes, you did very well. It was a very nice presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.